28th of August, 1990. Plainfield, Illinois. It was a normal afternoon just like any other. School was about to start. The corn stood tall in the fields, and while everyone was living another day, the sky over Will County did something it had never done before.
On my way home, I noticed from coming south in the mirror, from the north, it was getting very dark.
There were no sirens. No warning crawled across a television screen. One of the most violent tornadoes ever measured in the United States was already on the ground, chewing toward town. And the people in its path had no idea it was coming. Illinois had never been gentle with tornadoes. Back in March of 1925, the deadliest twister in American history, the tri-state tornado, had raked across the southern part of the state and two others, killing nearly 700 people in a single afternoon. And in April of 1967, the Oak Lawn tornado tore through the Chicago suburbs, killing 33 and injuring hundreds. But those were spring storms, born in the season when the atmosphere is supposed to turn deadly.
18 tornadoes slash a 200-mile path of death and destruction across northern Illinois. The Chicago suburb, Oak Lawn, and the farm town of Belvedere were hardest hit.
What made this day different was the calendar. Since modern records began in the 1950s, no tornado stronger than an F3 had ever touched down in Illinois in the month of August. August tornadoes were not supposed to be monsters. Late summer was supposed to be safe. The morning gave no reason to think otherwise. The forecast had called for warm skies and maybe a passing shower with a 40% chance of rain. Nothing anyone would rearrange a day around. But by late morning, the temperature had climbed into the low 90s, roughly 10 degrees hotter than a late August day should be. What nobody standing in that heat could feel was that the sky above them was loading itself like a spring. Meteorologists later measured the available energy in the atmosphere that afternoon at more than double what they normally call extreme. All that fuel needed was a trigger, a weak disturbance drifting over the Great Lakes, and a cold front pushing in from the west slid together like two hands closing. And the storm they made would not behave like anything the region had seen.
Oh my gosh, that looks like there's rotation. That looks like the wall cloud. Oh, I better get out of here.
The supercell first came together near Janesville in south-central Wisconsin, a little after noon. For a while it looked like an ordinary summer thunderstorm, tall and gray and unremarkable. But it was already rotating, already breathing in that overheated air, and it kept getting stronger. A little before 2 in the afternoon, it dropped its first brief funnel near Pecatonica, 15 miles west of Rockford. A warning sign glimpsed for a moment and then gone. The storm did not weaken. It turned and rolled southeast toward the suburbs of Chicago, growing with every mile. And that direction alone should have raised alarms, because violent tornadoes in this part of the country almost always travel toward the northeast. This one was breaking the rules, tracking southeast, which meant that everything forecasters thought they knew about where it would go next was already wrong. Through the middle of the afternoon, the storm kept testing the ground. Between about 2:45 and 1/4 past, it spun up a string of short-lived tornadoes across southwestern Kane County. Brief touchdowns in the farmland that damaged an airport near Sugar Grove and vanished almost as fast as they formed. Each one was the atmosphere clearing its throat. None of them lasted. But the rotation feeding them never stopped, and it was tightening. The first tornado warning should have gone out long before it did. Instead, it came almost an hour late, and the reasons behind that delay are the hardest part of this story to sit with. The National Weather Service office in Rosemont was the only station covering the entire region, and that afternoon, it was buried in work. Worse, the Doppler upgrade that might have given the forecasters a clear look inside the storm had been knocked out by a lightning strike weeks earlier and never repaired. On the single most dangerous afternoon in the region's history, the people responsible for the warnings were, in effect, working blind.
They would see where the storm is, which way it was moving. They weren't able to look at what the wind fields were like within the storm.
By the middle of the afternoon, the storm was dropping hail the size of golf balls, 2 inches across, hammering rooftops and windshields, and its radar signature had curled into the tight hook shape that forecasters dread. Even on the aging equipment in Rosemont, the hook was there for anyone to see. Yet the bulletin that went out at 23 minutes past 3 warned only of severe thunderstorms. It said nothing about a tornado, and it drew the threat area in the wrong place, away from the towns actually standing in the storm's path. The people of Plainfield were not just unwarned, they were, in a sense, warned about the wrong thing, in the wrong place, at the wrong time. Northeast of Plainfield, near Oswego, the tornado finally settled onto the ground for good, out in Kendall County, snapping corn stalks and flinging farm equipment across open fields. For a few minutes it stayed almost quiet, a rural nuisance, tearing up soybeans. Then it began to grow. It reached the Wheatland Plains subdivision as an F3 and flattened nearly every house it touched, destroying a dozen homes and burying people in the wreckage of their own living rooms. Past the subdivision, it kept intensifying, and here the ground itself tells the story. In the worst of it, surveyors found narrow ribbons where the tornado had scoured the earth down to bare soil, stripping mature corn out of the ground root and stalk. This was no longer an F3. This was an F5, winds estimated near 300 miles an hour. A tornado in the top fraction of a percent of anything nature produces. On its way into town, it grabbed 2 steel electrical transmission towers, structures engineered to stand against 120-mile-an-hour wind, and twisted them like wire. And still, in Plainfield, not one siren sounded. Just before it reached the high school, a semi-trailer was ripped off the highway and hurled more than half a mile through the air, killing the driver. 3 other motorists died when the storm threw their vehicles off the road. The monster was moving now at nearly 50 miles an hour, and it was aimed straight at Plainfield High School, where the first day of the year was only hours away. Inside, more than 100 football players were finishing a workout, and the girls' volleyball team was setting up for its home opener. It was a coach who saved them. Wayne DeSutter looked up, did not like what he saw building over the field, and pulled his players inside before anyone told him to. In the gym, the volleyball coach felt the same wrongness and shouted at her girls to move. They funneled into an interior hallway and dropped against the wall. It is said that the last player made it through the door just as the wind tore it back open.
It was at that point we knew that this was not your typical afternoon thunderstorm.
Then the building came apart above them. The roof lifted and slammed and lifted again, and the roar, survivors said, was like kneeling inside the engine of a jet. Some of the football players had the presence of mind to pull their helmets back on. Glass and insulation and pieces of the school itself screamed down the corridor over their heads, and then, as suddenly as it had come, there was silence. When it passed, that hallway was the only part of the school still standing. The athletes who crawled out into the daylight could not tell where they were. The trees were gone, the houses were gone. Every landmark they had grown up with had been wiped off the horizon, and boys who had walked those streets their whole lives stood in the wreckage of their own school, unable to say which direction was home.
We're going to be going to a different school homecoming. I mean, we're not going to have a homecoming.
Not having football.
We're not going to have football. I have no house. I have no place to go. Where are we supposed to go? What are we supposed to do?
And yet, when they counted heads, more than 150 student athletes and their coaches walked out alive. 5 more minutes of hesitation and most of them would not have. But 3 people inside the school could not be saved. Stephen Hunt, a science teacher, died when a trailer was thrown into the 2nd floor of his building. 2 maintenance workers died with him. The tornado did not stop for the school. It crossed into downtown Plainfield, and erased the school district's administration building, killing a custodian's wife inside. It crossed the highway and tore into St. Mary Immaculate Church and its school, taking 3 more lives, among them the school's principal and a music teacher. 55 homes in Plainfield were destroyed outright. Some were simply gone, swept off their foundations. Even the headstones in the cemetery were knocked flat. Still at full strength, the tornado ground southeast into the neighborhoods beyond. Crystal Lawns, Lily Cache, Peerless Estates, Warwick, weakening only slightly, still strong enough to lift cars and pull grown trees out of the earth. In Crystal Lawns alone, 69 homes were destroyed. In Peerless Estates, 75. Street after street of ordinary suburban houses, mortgages and swing sets and family photographs, reduced in seconds to splintered lumber and bare slabs. 5 more people died across those subdivisions. And then it reached the Crest Hill Lakes apartments. And here it took 8 lives in a matter of seconds, collapsing one building and shearing away half of another. Whole families were pulled from the rubble, already gone. One survivor, a boy, woke up in a cornfield beside his younger sister, both of them thrown clear, and learned that the rest of his family had not survived the storm. From Crest Hill, the tornado pushed into Joliet, finally fading, dropping from F3 to F2 to F1, taking a last few lives before it lifted for good near the corner of Woodlawn and Campbell. From first touchdown to last, it had lasted less than half an hour. In that half hour, it had carved a scar 16 miles long. When the survivors lifted their heads, what they saw did not look like Illinois. It looked like a war had passed through. 29 people were dead. 353 were injured. 470 homes were destroyed, and more than 1,000 damaged, with the losses climbing past $165 million.
I did get a little leery pulling some of the plywood and everything away from the reeds, because you never know what you might find in a disaster like this.
But the arithmetic misses the thing that mattered most. In a town that size, everyone knew someone under a wall or in a hospital bed. The emergency shelter set up for the homeless sat nearly empty, because there was no one who had lost a house who did not also have a neighbor willing to take them in. The failures of that day did not go unanswered. In the years after, the Weather Service split the impossible workload of the Rosemont office, opening new stations in Romoville in 1993 and in Lincoln 2 years later. And Doppler radar became standard rather than a broken luxury. Inside the forecasting world, the disaster even earned its own name for a lesson learned the hardest way possible. Better to sound the alarm too often than to stay silent once and bury 29 people. Schools across the region began running tornado drills the way they ran fire drills over and over, until finding the interior hallway became instinct. Warnings that once came, an hour too late, now come with minutes to spare, and in a storm like this one, minutes are lives. A memorial stands in Plainfield today, and every year the town gathers to read the names. 29 of them. 29 people who went to work and to practice and to church on an ordinary Tuesday. To this day, the Plainfield tornado is the only F5 ever recorded in the United States in the month of August. The people who lived through it will tell you they listen differently now. When the sky turns that strange shade of green, they do not wait to see what it means. Neither should you. Trust the warning, know where you will go. Because on an ordinary afternoon in August, in a town that had never seen anything like it, the second chance never came. Make sure to subscribe. It takes a lot of effort to make these videos.